Our Torah service in just a moment, but I'd like to just offer some words of framing. And this is probably going to be most of when I talk. I will say some things at Yizkor, which I know is traditional, but I think the bulk of what I'm going to share this morning is going to be right now. Yesterday I had the really wonderful opportunity to be on a call with clergy from all over Oregon, from top of the state to the bottom of the state, from all kinds of denominations and religious backgrounds. And with so much going on, and it's like hard to even say such a trite thing, there's so much happening in the world. But right, I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. It was very encouraging to be with this wonderful group of clergy. In particular because it struck me that the fact that we can do that we can gather around common causes and connect with one another and be in community is really quite a recent thing. It's really quite extraordinary that we're able to do that. And one of the things that over time, the insight that we've developed is that throughout so many of our spiritual traditions are certain threads that run throughout all of them that we can find, right? Common language, right? Common ways of thinking and common commitments together. So those of us who have had the chance to study together in classes know that I'm very fond of one framework that highlights some of those common threads, one of them being the 6 ways of being religious. What we find is that across world religions, there are sort of these 6 propensities, right, that exist to express spirituality and trying to ultimately develop a relationship with God, with ultimate reality, whatever the name for it might be. So they are, and none of these I think are going to be particularly surprising, but they're ritual performance, devotion, mystical quest, moral action, intellectual or rational inquiry, and shamanic mediation. And what's interesting about those is that many of them sit in tension with one another. For example, the heart of devotion oftentimes sits in a creative tension with the mind of intellectual inquiry and spiritual expression. And similarly, probably the most classic, and it's the one that's investigated, I think, by our Torah and Haftarah reading this morning, is ritual performance and moral action. There's something about the great religious traditions that have a wealth, a treasure when it comes to those 2 ways of being spiritual. When we think about the beautiful ritual performance that exists, especially in our tradition, I mean, that's what we're doing here. We've been gathered here by ritual performance. It is a shared lifeblood that we have that connects us together. And it's also true that sometimes sits in tension with moral action. And sometimes we get lost in the ritual and forget, perhaps, what the ritual is supposed to be directing us toward. And I think the Torah reading and the Haftarah reading together today really have us examine that closely. And in some ways, I think it actually helps us ultimately break down that binary, that maybe these aren't in tension, and they actually exist in a beautiful, mutually supportive relationship. But I just want to linger on one point in particular, because by the time we're done with the Haftarah today, it's pretty clear where our tradition wants us to put the emphasis. I'm just going to read a few of the lines. We read as follows. Your fasting today is not such as to make your voice heard on high. Is such the fast that I desire, a day for people to starve their bodies? Is it bowing the head like a bulrush and lying in sackcloth and ashes? Do you call that a fast? A day when Adonai is favorable? No. This is the fast I desire, to unlock the fetters of wickedness and untie the cords of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. It is to share your bread with the hungry and to take the wretched poor into your home when you see them naked, to clothe them and do not ignore your own flesh. Then shall your light burst through like the dawn and your healing spring up quickly. I think it's pretty unequivocal. But I also want to ask the question, I think in many ways, when we hear that, there's something that's very intuitive. We say, well, yeah, of course it's about the moral action at the end of the day. Right? There's something that really resonates and makes sense to us. But I want to ask why. Because many traditions throughout history have actually made a different argument. You can go back as far as the Stoics, for example, but there have been many, many examples since then. No, it is actually somehow to reach some type of personal enlightenment through things like ritual and mantra and meditation. And all those things are very important, by the way. I'm not in any way trying to diminish their value. But a case has been made that actually, no, ritual performance on its own is fine. So why is it that we feel it's so intuitive that it's all about moral action at the end of the day? There's one midrash that I think really highlights what it is, and it's something that I hope we can hold on to a bit today. It turns out that humanity, when God wanted to create humanity, had some serious second thoughts about it. And so what did God do? God approached the angels and said, listen, I've got this project. I want to hear what you guys think. And so quickly, the angels break into 4 camps. The first camp of angels are called the Chesed party. And they approach God and they say, we're the Chesed party. We're all about kindness, And let me tell you something. Human beings will do kind things. It's going to be one of their defining characteristics. God says, thanks, appreciate that. Then there's the truth party, the Emet party. And they come and they say, we feel differently because those human beings, this project that you're outlining, they're going to tell a lot of lies. That's also going to be one of their defining characteristics. God says, fair enough. Thanks, Emet party. And then we have the Tzedakah party that arrived and said, but hold on. The fact of the matter is, human beings will commit themselves to justice. That will be one of their crowning achievements. Don't they deserve a chance if it means they'll get to do justice in the world? So God hears that, nods, appreciates that argument. And the final group, the final party, was the Shalom party. And they said, these people are going to fight all the time. So God's kind of in a quandary because it's 2 to 2. So how does God decide? In a passage I'm not sure I totally understand. And it's one probably I think is one of those great mysteries that we can think about and develop new insights into as we study it throughout our lives. But what happens next in this midrash is that God takes the angel of truth and throws it down to the earth and says, truth has to grow up from the ground. Again, I actually don't know exactly what that means, but I think it has something to do with the fact that truth is complicated. And it comes from people's lived experiences, and it comes from multiple perspectives, and it comes from conversations and dialogue. Truth is complicated. And God quotes that verse. Truth has to grow up from the ground. So we can't settle that right now, whether or not human beings will be full of lies or not. We'll have to leave that. And that did a remarkable thing. Now it made it 2 to 1. Thanks to the Chesed and Tzedakah parties, humanity gets created. But I want us to think about that for a second, because I believe that that is why Yeshayahu Hanavi, Isaiah the prophet, comes down so clearly that at the end of the day, ritual is important. Again, I in no way mean to demean the value of ritual, but it is very clear in our tradition that ritual is not an end in and of itself. Ritual is a means to a greater end. It is the means to the end of doing kindness and doing justice. Because at the end of the day, that is the only reason we got a shot to be here. Because God was convinced that we would do those 2 things. I love ritual. Ask anybody who knows me well. It's ridiculous. My kids get so mad because I keep wanting to sing another song, right, and another tefillah, and I choose a melody that's really long and drawn out. I love ritual. But that's not why we're here. It's to help us get to why we're here. And so I want us to think about today. Let's do this ritual because it is beautiful and it lights up that light inside of us. But let's not forget that the purpose of it is to let that light, like the Navi Yeshayahu says, to let it burst forth outward and to share that light with other people. Sometimes we get ritual right, sometimes we don't. God is very forgiving with us about that, and we can hold on to that fact. But what we cannot fail in, to quote Lin-Manuel Miranda, where we cannot throw away our shot, is around kindness and justice. Chesed u'tzedakah. It's the only reason we got to be here. So let's justify those angels' faith in us, and let's justify the shot that God gave us. We read our Torah reading on page 200. For all who live on earth shall realize we have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, to labor, and to love. Fulfill the promise conveyed in Scripture, I will bring peace to the land, and you shall lie down, and no one shall terrify you. Let love and justice flow like a mighty stream. Let peace fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. And let us say, Amen. We're going to begin now our Yizkor service after these comments. It is a tradition of some whose parents are living have the custom to leave at this point, but we also want to invite people to remain and to stay together as a community during that Yizkor service. We have a preoccupation. Not done, did you say? Okay. We have a preoccupation in Western society with the hero's journey, right? Famously outlined by Joseph Campbell. There are stirring tales, right, of epic adventures and defeats, and then coming back and triumphing over monsters. And there is vital lessons to be learned from that great arc, the great arc of those kinds of stories. And in fact, in sort of recent years, it's become a template for thinking about life, too, to thinking about the people that we remember, to thinking about lives in general, in sort of this format of this hero's journey. But the hero's journey has two severe limitations. Number one, the story is really only about the hero. Everybody else that exists in that story is kind of a side character, and they all live in service of the hero. And the other sort of more obvious shortcoming of this structure is that most of our life is actually not like that. In fact, this led the great writer, science fiction writer and poet, and Portland legend, Ursula K. Le Guin, to suggest a different model for how we should consider stories, but also how we should consider life. She called it the carrier bag theory of telling stories. And in it, we all move through the world with our containers, our carrier bags. Some are for oats and seeds that we bring and try to use to feed those we love, who have their own carrier bags. And we put them together and we exchange what we've got and we learn from one another. And then these people, all with their carrier bags, go to a shared carrier bag that they live in, called a house or a home. And there we inhabit in them and we interact and we make more containers, more carrier bags for water, for wisdom, for medicine, for humor, the stuff of everyday life. Maimonides actually makes a strikingly similar comment when he is talking about the great knowledge that we can acquire. In his Hilchot Yesodei HaTorah, the foundations of the Torah, he says, there's two kinds of knowledge that we can have. He says, one is called the great knowledge by the rabbis. He says, and that is stuff like Ma'aseh HaMerkavah, this speculative, philosophical, mystical knowledge. He says, and that is great knowledge. And then there are what's called small knowledge, Devar Katan, the small things, characterized by what are called Havayot de Abaye veRava, the conversations of Abaye and Rava in the Talmud, who had back and forth on many pages of the Talmud about all kinds of things, mostly daily stuff, things we should eat, thinking about how we conduct ourselves in the world, how to manage disagreements. And those are considered the small knowledge in comparison to that great speculative, philosophical, mystical stuff. He says, Afal pichen, he says, granted, those might be small things though, those everyday kinds of interactions. He says, Ro'in hen lahaktiman, but we should treat those as primary. We should put those first. Shehen me'ashavin da'ato shel adam techila, because they actually give something for our minds to settle on. They give us practical wisdom and practical guidance, so we can move with some peace and serenity in this world. Not only that, that's actually how we live. That's the stuff. All of the everyday interactions, the small things, they're what make life possible. And it's actually through the small stuff that not only do we live in this world, but we figure out the merit for the world to come. So when I think about Yizkor, the insight of the carrier bag theory and this comment from Maimonides feels very real. We think of the people we've lost, and while some memories will be heroic, and so many of the people that we love did heroic things, and we should give those their due attention. Most of our memories, though, are going to be about the containers they made and shared with us, and that we shared in together. Furthermore, as Maimonides highlights, these moments, the small things, are the substance that brings one to life in the world to come. If by no other means, then by the simple one that they are what allow the souls of our dearly departed ones to live in our hearts, our very first containers, to live there in our hearts, our memories, and our minds forever. As we prepare for the Yizkor service, I invite us to consider, yes, the heroic moments of those we've loved and lost, but even more so,